Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the inability of humankind, mankind, to learn from the lessons of the past. Now, it's possible to learn, lessons from the past. Obviously, the mathematics of Euclid or Archimedes or whatever from thousands of years ago has been built on, and the advanced mathematics of calculus and all sorts of things today that we use. So clearly, it's possible to learn from the past and to build on the knowledge of the past. But when it comes to man's inhumanity to man, and the secret police, Stasi, the KGB, and the Soviet Union, the Chinese secret police, the North Korean secret police, the murder squads of Pol Pot. I mean, the list goes on and on, where the lessons of the past have not been learned, or they've been ignored, or maybe a bit of both. So now, the favorite example that everyone holds up of unspeakable evil of the past is, of course, the Nazi regime. That's the one that's the go-to, that's the standard go-to. Now, in terms of brutality, particularly against his own citizens, the Nazis are actually well down the list. The North Korean regime, Cambodia, China, the Soviet Union, various communist countries around Eastern Europe, they're all, well ahead of where the Nazis were in terms of targeting or oppressing their own population. Well, if you look at the ratio of secret police in the Nazi regime to the overall population, then it was quite small compared to, say, the Soviet Union or East Germany during the Cold War, the Soviet era Cold War. So here's a couple of things here, learning from the past. Now, the Jews in particular have pointed to the Nazi regime as being the biggest, the biggest example of oppression of Jews, anti-Semitism, and so on. And there's a small film clip of a Jewish man that's been brought into a Nazi people's court on the basis of an allegation only. But the judge, excuse me, the judge allows the accuser, who's a Gentile, allows the accuser to make an allegation, unsupported really. There's no evidence to back it up, or none that's been tendered, just an allegation. And the judge says, well, I'm going to believe that allegation. That allegation is now fact. And then turns to the Jewish man and says, well, you have to now disprove that because we're going to treat that allegation, that uncorroborated, unproven allegation, as fact. And if you don't disprove it to the court's satisfaction, then you'll be deemed guilty and fined and so on, and treated harshly by the state. Now, the suggestion in the article, or the clip, is that the Jewish man's committed no crime and he's simply being targeted by an ideological court that's determined to get him no matter what, or determined to get the Jewish guy no matter what. So he proves that he actually wasn't in, or brings evidence to prove that he actually wasn't in the village at the time of the alleged event where he's supposed to have done something to offend a Gentile woman. So, but the judge just disallows the evidence. So I'm not going to accept that evidence because it's by other Jewish people. So the guy quite rightly says, well, I'm a Jewish guy. I was hanging out with other Jewish people. Now, on the face of it, the judge had no reason to disallow the evidence from the Jewish guy, but nonetheless, the judge just said, well, I'm not going to allow that, and the Jewish guy was convicted. Now, this is held up as an example of a corrupt ideological court determined to go and get the Jewish guy no matter what, and would lower the burden of proof for any evidence against the Jewish guy. So an allegation alone, unproven, is going to be enough, but then would raise the burden of proof that the Jewish guy had to meet in order to disprove the allegation. Now, that this is an outrageous abuse of due legal process. If they give weight to the allegation that the Jewish guy committed a crime, then they should give equal weight to his denials and his evidence that would counter that allegation. But they don't. Instead, they juggle that burden of proof. Now, that's considered an outrage. An outrage. It's fucking anti-Semitism. It's fucking Nazis. It's fucking fascist. It's fucking evil, Hitler. Okay, so that's the epitome of evil. That's the standard we're going to use. Everyone in agreement? That's the standard. Now, let's go to the divorce court in a Western country, supposedly one that has human rights, Bill of Rights, and so on. So a woman says in a divorce court, by the way, the judge is Jewish, interestingly here. So the woman says, he abused me. He did something. No evidence, no proof, no nothing. So the Jewish judge in a divorce court in a modern Western country, this is a few years ago, says, okay, well, I'm accepting that as fact. Your allegation is fact. You, Mr. Billy Bob Smith, you have to now disprove it. And the only evidence I will accept from you, Mr. Billy Bob Smith, the only evidence is if you can prove you were not in the country, in the whole nation. You're not even in the nation at the time. Not that you weren't in the city or the town or that place or that house or that building, but you weren't in the nation. And in order to prove that to the court's satisfaction, you must produce a stamped passport, stamped by the immigration authorities. You must produce it right now in the court, so that I can arbitrate the judge, the Jewish judge. Let me let that sink in. The Jewish judge says to this man, I'm going to arbitrarily place upon you a very high burden of proof, and I'm not even going to let you go and get the evidence, even if you have it. So therefore, you are guilty of abuse. And so the Jewish judge has just lowered the burden of proof so it hits the floor. You can't get any lower than this. A vague, unsupported, uncorroborated allegation is fact. But the straight white male, Gentile male, he has to prove to an incredibly high burden of proof that he didn't do it or wasn't there or wasn't even in the country at the time in this case. Now, this is an outrageous abuse of the burden of proof, and where it is a premeditated attempt to steal this man's legal rights, basic fundamental legal rights. Now, from that, he then has to suffer a variety of fines and impositions. His income is going to be stolen. All sorts of things are going to happen as a consequence of this court hearing, this court case. So for the man, his future is very much affected. So this is clearly a cruel and unusual punishment. A cruel and unusual punishment. Now, I'm sitting there in the court looking at this, amazed. Now, this is a Jewish man, a judge. He's been a Jewish lawyer of some standing. He obviously understands the law. He understands at least the technical practice. So he understands, right? Now, he's also been an activist in Jewish associations, denouncing Nazis, anti-Semites are everywhere, and this sort of thing. Now, if any lesson from the past was to be learned, any lesson at all, and by the Jewish diaspora as much, if not more than any others, would be that as soon as you allow due legal process and the rule of law to be tampered with for ideological reasons, back in Nazi Germany to target and legally disenfranchise Jewish people, if you allow that to happen, then the consequences, well, we saw, and it's well documented, extensively documented. Jewish people study it every day. It's drummed into them through the school system and so on, the Jewish school system. And yet, in spite of those lessons of the past, this Jewish judge repeated exactly the same things that the Nazi judge did in the court targeting Jews. Exactly the same. Almost exactly the same wording, script, style, approach, manner. And not only that, in the Nazi court, and this is something that really rankles with the Jews, in the Nazi court, the judge because when the Jewish guy tried to explain, well, I wasn't there and I've got witnesses, the Nazi guy deliberately engaged in acts of intimidation towards the Jewish guy, the Jewish man, and encouraged the orderlies and the apparatchiks and the administrative staff in the court to laugh and jeer at the guy and to otherwise just try and crush him in the court, to publicly humiliate him and so on. And this inviting the others to laugh and jeer at him. And this is exactly what the Jewish judge did in the fucking divorce court. Exactly the same. He sneered, he threw documents on the floor. He did everything he could to humiliate this straight white guy. And exactly the same as the fucking Nazi judge did. Now, this is very concerning. And to me, it's concerning in particular because I'm, as you may already know, a very firm believer in that the rule of law and due legal process is absolutely fucking sacrosanct in a modern democracy and functioning government. Absolutely sacrosanct. But in this case, the Jewish judge, out of all judges you could have found, an activist Jewish judge who's banging on about the evil Nazis and anti-Semitism, makes exactly the same mistakes. And I won't say mistakes, it was premeditated in this guy's case, but did exactly the same thing as the Nazi judge did to the Jewish litigant in the Nazi court. Now, if anyone should have understood the past and learned the lessons of the past, it should be, well, any judge for that matter, but in particular a Jewish judge, particularly one that's steeped in Jewish understanding and attitudes and views of the past. Yet he makes this mistake. Now, if that's going to happen in this case to someone of clearly above average intelligence, this Jewish guy's no idiot, this judge, and someone who's been schooled endlessly in the evils of the past, instead of perceiving the evil of the past of a struggle between Gentiles and Jews, which clearly he does, instead of seeing it that way, protect the rule of law and due legal process. Because once an evil government comes up against the rule of law, which applies equally to everyone, it's very difficult for them to target any group just arbitrarily, very difficult. Similarly, if due legal process is considered as sacrosanct, it's very difficult to target someone in the court. So, well, I'll accept this evidence, but not that. Not that judges shouldn't have some discretion, they should. But this idea of I'll give a vague, unsupported allegation, I'll treat that as fact, and I'll give the hard facts in rebuttal, I will dismiss that and not allow it. That sort of thing is not an observance in any way of due legal process. Each person's evidence must be given equal weight, based on the evidence. And sure, it can be tested, it can be cross-examined, it can be all that sort of thing. This evidence isn't right because those signatures are fake. So, there's all that testing of the evidence, and that's fine. But when an uncorroborated allegation comes in that looks a bit shaky on the face of it anyway, you can't treat that as fact. Because that's not an observance of due legal process. So what we have to understand here, that the lessons of the past, I'm going to do another video on this, actually. I'll split into two, otherwise this one's going to be too long. But the lessons of the past, certainly in this context, aren't being understood. And in this case, not understood by a Jewish intellectual, I'm not so sure, but certainly an above average intelligence Jewish guy Jewish judge, who should more than any should be aware of the mistakes of the past, and that we can't allow ourselves to fall into those same traps again. But we do, generation after generation after generation. We make the same fucking mistakes, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should be able to rise above that, and our elected representatives and our government and our institutions should be rigorously enforcing the rule of law, the equal application of the rule of law, and of course, due legal process. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.